Should you read Fire and Blood? Well, it's a complicated question, with a more complicated answer than you might actually think at first. It really depends on what you're looking to get out of it, and how you feel about knowing what's going to happen in spin-offs such as House of the Dragon. For me, the world building is the element of George R. R. Martin's work that I love the most, so books like Fire and Blood always spoke to me the same way the Silmarillion does for Tolkien's expanded lore with The Lord of the Rings. But Fire and Blood can be a bit of a daunting prospect of a read when you first pick it up. It's huge, and at some points dense book. But there are some alternative methods you could use to consume the content. The idea of reading a 736-page fictional history is not for you. The video will hopefully answer any questions you have and maybe give you some new ideas if you're planning to reread the content. I have an interesting relationship with Fire and Blood. I first read it in the run-up to Season 8 of Game of Thrones to kill the time while we waited for it. I was a little bit bemused at first when I realised just how much of the first few sections of Fire and Blood were directly taken from the world of Ice and Fire. But the more I read it, the more I fell in love with it, to the point I would argue it's possibly my favourite book in the Song of Ice and Fire canon. In fact, it was my love of Fire and Blood, and to some extent the world of Ice and Fire, that allowed me to move past my disappointment of Season 8 and embrace my love of the lore of the wider world of Westeros. When Fire and Blood first came out on the 20th of November 2018, it was almost immediately hit with a lot of poor reviews and very negative articles online, either from uninformed journalists who were looking for a good story, or people who had brought the book thinking it was the next installment in the Song of Ice and Fire series. And to be fair, the marketing could have been clearer about this. As a result, Fire and Blood gained a very negative reputation within the wider fandom as just some boring history book written in third person with no real purpose, which I think put a lot of people off giving it a chance. It is in reality what inspired this channel. I wanted to tell the stories of the wonderful characters of Fire and Blood in an easy and digestible way, almost make a visually compelling audiobook of sorts. The negative reputation is something Fire and Blood has found very hard to shake off, and I understand why. Some fans are bitter that it's not the Winds of Winter, and I can get that. But in the run-up to House of the Dragon, and during the show's first season, it was great to see people more interested in what Fire and Blood offers. So the main question, should you read Fire and Blood if you've watched House of the Dragon? Should you even pick up this book at all if you're just a fan of the main book series? Now, it very much depends on a few factors. Fire and Blood is not like A Song of Ice and Fire. It's a history book written by maesters, using multiple sources, using sometimes conflicting accounts from the time. While there are some great characters, and you will grow to love some of them, and you do get a sense of who they are as people, it is very much an overview of events that happen. For example, you really do get a good sense of who, let's say, Jaehaerys and Alysanne are as people through their actions and relationships. When it presents multiple conflicting accounts of events, it's up to you, the reader, to decide what version of them you believe. In the same way House of the Dragon has broadly had to choose their own path when it comes to these conflicting moments. So if you have just watched the first season of House of the Dragon and can't wait for season 2 to find out what happens, then be aware you are going to be getting a top-down overview of events, lacking the detail House of the Dragon offers you. If you're okay with that, and don't mind knowing the events of season 2, then you should be okay. If you don't want the show to be spoiled for you, then you could just read Fire and Blood up to the point season 1 ends, and wait to read the rest. There is enough content, especially towards the end of Jaehaerys' reign, that gives a lot of context to the events of season 1 they didn't really have time to deal with, such as Viserys, Daemon and Rhaenys' parents, and how the succession crisis of the Great Council of 101 even began in the first place. Plus you get all the details that we lost during the time skips in the first season. However, one thing to bear in mind is the show has made some creative changes to some key events and timelines. For example, Alicent is about 10 years older than Rhaenyra in the books. Baelor and Rhaena are twins. The Great Council of 101 was a choice between Viserys and Laenor rather than Rhaenys. While some events also play out completely differently, it's not going to be clear until season 2 the extent of the changes in the long run. If the sheer density of Fire and Blood is not right for you, I would recommend picking up Rise of the Dragon. I was a little bit skeptical of this book at first, as I didn't really see the point in it. However, after buying a copy myself, I can definitely see its value. It's written more in a style of an encyclopedia, similar to The World of Ice and Fire. It's kind of a hybrid between that and Fire and Blood. where in it tells you the overview of the events and key players, but not to the extent of the detail Fire and Blood does sometimes. Rise of the Dragon is also designed as a coffee table book, so the pages themselves are a lot more colourful, with a much bigger font and hundreds of fantastic full-page colour illustrations that I wish I had access to when I first started making videos. Because I tell you what, finding images for some of the more obscure characters, places and events, especially during Jaehaerys' reign, back then was a nightmare. Having these images back then would have been fantastic. There's also some really cool maps, family trees and building layouts if that's your kind of thing. My girlfriend has ADHD. She tried to read Fire and Blood in the run-up to House of the Dragon, but she struggled to stay focused with it. The format of Rise of the Dragon, with the way the copy is handled and the addition of some great artwork, suited her much better than the long-form Fire and Blood. Another great option, if you're not a big reader, is to get the audiobook version of Fire and Blood. The approach to the narration might not be for everyone, because it can be a bit dry sometimes. The audiobook is my personal favourite way to consume Fire and Blood. I like the narration by Simon Vance, and I think it really gives me the vibe of a maester reading the book, and he does also bring to life some of the characters quite well. It is a long audiobook, coming in at about 28 hours, but if you're used to audiobooks, then that's nothing compared to the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. The way the story is told is great for putting on in the background when you're around the house or on a long drive. I even use it to help me sleep occasionally, as the narration isn't too distracting. It was listening to the audiobook at night that gave me the idea for this channel. It was wonderful hearing all this great content, but part of me wished there was some more visual representation to support it. Over time, the idea eventually developed into this channel, where I hope I found my own approach to telling the stories using Fire and Blood as a groundwork to work from. I love Fire and Blood, and I owe a lot to its existence, and while the format is not for everyone, I think it's a very misunderstood piece of work. While it is a fictional history book, the way it's handled is wonderful. There is a lot of relevant stuff to the main series, such as the origins of Daenerys' dragon eggs, and some really compelling mysteries, such as what really happened to Aeria Targaryen. There are characters you'll hate, and characters that you'll love. Yes, there are pieces of recycled content from other places, but some of the newer additions, like Jaehaerys' reign as king, turned out to be my most beloved parts of the book. And also, I love the expansion on the existing material as well, and feel events such as the Dance of the Dragons itself make a lot more sense and are a lot more compelling with the additional context. So when I hear people online just dismiss Fire and Blood as just a history book, I can't help but fundamentally disagree. To me, it's so much more than that, and I hope thanks to House of the Dragon, Fire and Blood will start to get the love it deserves.